Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into something truly foundational today, a topic that underpins, well, global health, economic stability, human dignity. Yet it's often overlooked in just how complex it is. We're talking about how we understand and tackle access to clean water and sanitation.
Yeah, it's fundamental.
And when you look at the sheer scale of this challenge, I mean, the numbers alone are pretty sobering. Inadequate water and sanitation, WatSan, contributes to roughly 3.5 million deaths every year. That's huge.
It's a staggering figure.
And it goes beyond that. 783 million people still live without access to an improved, safe water source. And get this, 2.5 billion people lack improved sanitation facilities. Billions.
Yeah.
It's just a colossal problem affecting almost everywhere.
Absolutely. And our mission in this deep dive really is to try and move beyond just those daunting statistics and the traditional ways we classify these things, which can be a bit simplistic. We're not just going to look at the problem itself, but we want to introduce you to a clever way researchers are trying to understand it better and address it.
How so?
By moving past simple things like geography or just, increment levels, this deep dive will introduce you to a powerful analytical tool. It's called country clustering.
Country clustering.
Yeah, and it helps connect the dots. It can show how different countries, even if they're nowhere near each other on a map, might actually be facing these vital challenges in, surprisingly similar ways.
Interesting.
It's all about getting to smarter, more effective solutions by seeing the world maybe with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And that multifaceted view you mentioned is so crucial because let's dig a little deeper into why this whole issue is so complex to begin with. It's way more than just, laying pipes or digging wells. Water and sanitation, WatSan. It's woven into the very fabric of public health, economic development, social equity, the environment.
It touches everything.
Totally. We're talking about a sector that's influenced by this complex mix of politics, economics, social norms, environmental pressures like climate change, demographic shifts like rapid urbanization, and of course, health outcomes directly. It's like a nexus point for global challenges.
And what's fascinating here is that inadequate access to safe drinking water and sanitation isn't just a local crisis. It's not just happening over there.
Right.
If we zoom out a bit, it impacts the very rise and sustainability of healthy cities everywhere and fundamentally global well-being. Think about the economic drag from diseases that are totally preventable or kids missing school because they're sick or the environmental damage from untreated waste.
They're huge impacts.
Exactly. So to really make progress against something this complex, we need nuanced, targeted solutions. But before we even get there, we need a much better, more granular way to categorize and understand the problem in its full complexity.
Because the old ways weren't quite cutting it.
Pretty much. Traditional methods, like grouping countries just by income level or by continent, they often fall short. They can hide important differences or similarities, which brings us right to today's topic.
Okay, so this is where it really gets interesting. The source material we're looking at introduces this powerful new lens, country clustering, specifically for water and sanitation, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay, imagine you have a massive puzzle. You wouldn't just sort the pieces by color, right? You'd look for how they connect, how they form similar shapes or parts of the picture.
That's a great analogy. That's essentially what this statistical tool does. It groups countries together based on similarities across a whole range of factors relevant to their WatSan realities, not just one or two things like location or income.
So what was the biggest problem with those traditional methods? Why did we need this clustering approach? What makes it so much more powerful?
That's an excellent question, and it really hits the core of why this research is so, impactful. The biggest limitation of the old ways is just oversimplification, lumping all developing nations together or all sub-Saharan African countries.
Right, it paints with too broad a brush.
Exactly. It masks enormous differences in their specific challenges, their capacities, their opportunities. What's truly fascinating here is the power of this clustering approach.
Yeah.
It lets us pinpoint countries that share common WatSan challenges and capacities, even if they're geographically thousands of miles apart.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Think about aid for water projects. Traditionally, it might get bundled for, say, all developing nations. But with clustering, we might find that a country like India, which is lower middle income, highly urbanizing, might actually share more specific challenges, like figuring out sanitation for huge informal settlements, with maybe the Philippines or South Africa, which fall into the same cluster, than it does with a largely rural, low-income country in a totally different cluster, even if that country is geographically closer.
Wow. Okay. So it's about shared problems, not shared borders.
Precisely. It means we can think about tailored solutions, sharing lessons learned between these cluster peers, and directing aid that actually fits the specific problem profile, not just a generic blueprint. It's about understanding the world based on shared, actionable realities.
That really is an aha moment. It completely reframes who a country's neighbors are in terms of shared challenges. So to really get how this clustering works, we need to look at the ingredients, right? The specific variables the research used to define a country's WatSan reality. You said it's more comprehensive than just counting taps?
Much more. They looked at a wide range of indicators.
Okay, wait.
Well, starting with some core economic and social stuff. They looked at economic strength using GDP per capita. That gives a sense of the overall resources available, the capacity to invest.
Makes sense.
Then, external support. They measured this using Water and Sanitation Official Development Assistance ODA. That's basically foreign aid specifically for WatSan projects. It shows how much international help a country is getting for this.
Okay, money in, aid in. What else?
Well, it goes deeper than just money. If we connect this to the bigger picture, they also looked at social equity and governance. Crucial stuff. They included internal equity using the Gini index. That's a standard measure of income inequality. A higher number means more inequality within the country.
And how does inequality link to water?
Well, what's compelling here is how often that Gini number correlates with who actually gets access to basic things like clean water. It highlights a pretty stark link between economic justice or injustice and health outcomes.
Absolutely. Okay, what about how well the government works?
Yep, that's in there too. Government capacity. They assess this using a measure called governance effectiveness, which looks at the quality of public administration, how reliably services are delivered basically, how well the country's institutions actually function.
Crucial.
Definitely. And they also included human capital measured by expected years of education per capita. This gives an idea of the population's general education level, which often links to technical capacity and even public health awareness.
Right. And the environment itself. Water isn't just about pipes, it's about the source.
Exactly. So they included natural resources by looking at renewable freshwater availability per person. That's a direct measure of how much water a country naturally has. And urbanization, the percentage of people living in cities, that's critical because cities have unique, often really intense water management challenges. Infrastructure demands, waste disposal, it's a different ballgame.
Okay, so a really broad mix. Economics, equity, governance, education, environment, urbanization. And finally, I assume, they looked at actual access.
The bottom line, yes, actual access to improved services. They measured the percentage of the population with access to improved household water sources, like piped water inside, or a protected well and improved sanitation sources, like a flush toilet or a proper latrine.
So with all those pieces, economics, education, equity, governance, environment, urbanization, actual access, when you put them all together through this clustering analysis, what kind of picture emerges? What did they find?
Well, they absolutely found distinct patterns. Combining all these diverse indicators, it paints a much, much richer and more accurate picture of a country's real WatSan situation than any single metric ever could.
Right, you see the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. It's about the whole ecosystem influencing access. It moves us beyond those simple assumptions to a data-driven view of global realities. And to answer your question, when they ran the analysis, 5 distinct clusters of countries emerged, each cluster grouping countries with really unique shared characteristics related to water and sanitation. It basically creates a whole new kind of global map for this issue.
5 clusters. Okay, this is where that new global map really starts to take shape. Let's walk through them. What's the first one like?
So cluster 1. This has 33 countries. You can think of it as the highest performing group.
Okay.
These are typically wealthy nations, high GDP per capita, really good governance effectiveness scores, the lowest income inequality according to the Gini index, and as you'd expect, excellent near universal WatSan access.
So Western Europe, North America, Australia, places like that.
Exactly those kinds of places. For them, the big challenges now are often less about basic access and more about things like maintaining infrastructure that might be aging or adapting to climate change impacts on water resources.
Right, different kinds of problems.
Very different. And what this cluster really highlights is that strong link between stable economic development, good governance, and equitable access to essential services like water. They offer lessons, for sure, but their solutions are often very capital intensive, maybe not easily transferable everywhere.
Gotcha. Okay, cluster 1, what's next?
Next is Cluster 2, which has 28 countries. These are also high-income nations, generally, but distinct from Cluster 1.
How so?
Well, you often find countries from Eastern Europe and Central Asia in this group. A key characteristic is strong human capital, high expected years of education. Think maybe Bulgaria, Hungary, Kazakhstan.
Okay.
They often inherited pretty established infrastructure systems, maybe from previous eras, but they might face different issues now, maybe around maintenance, efficiency, meeting modern environmental standards.
So good education levels, existing infrastructure, but maybe needing updates.
Precisely. It's an interesting contrast. Access rates are generally high, but the infrastructure might need significant upgrades. The good news is their strength in human capital suggests real potential for developing innovative local solutions, maybe in water treatment tech or smart water grids. They could potentially leapfrog some older problems.
Interesting. Okay, moving down the ladder a bit.
Yeah, stepping down slightly, we find Cluster 3. This is another group of 28 countries. These are primarily middle-income nations, often from Latin America, East Asia, and the Middle East.
So a real mix geographically.
A huge mix. Think Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Saudi Arabia. Compared to Clusters 1 and 2, they generally have lower WatSan access, though it's often improving.
This raises an important question, though. Why are these really diverse regions all lumped together in one cluster? What binds them?
That's the power of the clustering. It's not about geography. It's about shared characteristics. And what binds these countries are often the common challenges of managing rapid growth and increasing demand, especially in urban areas.
Okay. Urban pressures.
Exactly. Many are dealing with the complexities of megacities, sprawling urban growth, putting immense pressure on water resources and wastewater systems. So for these countries, the focus isn't just expanding basic access anymore, but dealing with efficiency, managing potential water scarcity, investing in more advanced and often costly treatment technologies. They're in a really critical development phase where smart investments now are key for long-term sustainability.
Right. Managing success and growth almost. Okay, what about cluster 4?
Cluster 4 includes 24 countries. We're generally talking lower middle income here. You find many nations from sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia in this group.
Okay.
Key characteristics: lower GDP per capita than the previous clusters, lower expected years of education, but, and this is important, often high urbanization rates, and significantly big gaps in WatSan access.
High urbanization, but lower income and access gaps. Examples.
Honduras, India, the Philippines, South Africa fall into this group. It sounds like, and it is, a cluster facing some really acute and distinct pressures.
Yeah, that combination seems particularly challenging.
Indeed. This cluster presents a kind of paradox. Rapid urbanization happening without the corresponding infrastructure development keeping pace. So you get this huge increase in demand for services in very dense, often informal settlements, but the resources to provide those services are limited.
So what kinds of solutions work there?
Well, solutions here often have to be different. They might involve decentralized systems, community-managed projects, finding ways to scale up technologies that are affordable and robust, things that can be maintained locally. This cluster really shows the need for solutions that are adaptable to quickly changing urban areas and diverse economic situations. And they often benefit a lot from learning from each other about tackling these urbanizations without formal infrastructure challenges.
Okay, that makes sense. And that leaves one more cluster.
Yeah. Yes. Cluster 5. This is the largest group with 51 countries. It's generally considered the lowest performing cluster in terms of the metrics used.
Where are these countries typically located?
Predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. They're characterized by the lowest GDP per capita, the lowest overall WatSan access rates across the board, and also the lowest scores on governance effectiveness.
So facing the biggest challenges on multiple fronts. Examples.
Countries like Cambodia, Mozambique, Pakistan are in this cluster. It paints a very clear picture of where the greatest needs and the most deeply rooted systemic challenges lie.
A tough situation.
Absolutely. This cluster highlights the critical need for really fundamental foundational support. Interventions here often have to tackle more than just the technical side of WatSan. They need to help build governance structures, increase human capital, secure stable funding.
It's about building the whole system, not just the pipes.
Exactly. Progress here is often slower. It requires sustained international aid, serious capacity building, and a focus on basic, resilient infrastructure that can actually function long-term in challenging environments. The insights from this cluster really underscore that basic access can't be separated from broader development goals like poverty reduction and improving governance. They're all tied together. Progress in one often helps unlock progress elsewhere.
Okay, so we have these 5 distinct clusters, this new map. What does this all mean for actually improving WatSan access globally? Let's talk about the practical impact. This clustering tool sounds like it could be really profound for policymakers, researchers, aid organizations. How does it change how we might develop, say, targeted interventions?
Well, it really transforms how we approach problem solving in this space. For targeted interventions, instead of just applying a generic solution, this tool gives a much deeper understanding of what specific approaches have worked or might work for countries with similar profiles, those within the same cluster.
So, less guesswork.
Much less. Imagine you're advising a government. You can now look at a peer country within the same cluster that's maybe had some success with, I don't know, implementing low-cost decentralized sanitation. There's a much higher chance that solution could be adapted and work in your country because you share similar underlying economic, governance, and social contexts. It helps avoid wasting time and resources on ideas that just don't fit the reality on the ground.
That makes incredible sense. It's like having a much better compass, pointing you towards relevant examples.
Okay.
What about resource allocation? Does this help donors and governments spend money more effectively?
Oh, definitely. It's potentially revolutionary for resource allocation. Donors can direct aid far more strategically, focusing it where it can realistically have the most impact.
How so?
Instead of broad categories, they can support interventions tailored to a cluster's unique needs and capacities. For example, a donor working with Cluster 5 countries might prioritize basic, resilient infrastructure and building up governance capacity. Whereas for Cluster 3, the focus might be more on advanced water conservation tech for big cities or complex urban wastewater treatment. That kind of specificity means every dollar or euro or whatever has a much better chance of leading to sustainable, long-term outcomes.
And the last piece, monitoring progress. That's always tricky in development. How does clustering help there?
Yeah, it's a game changer for monitoring, too. Countries can now be compared more meaningfully against their true peers, those within their own cluster, rather than against, say, a global average or countries with totally different situations.
It's a more realistic benchmark.
Exactly. It gives a far more accurate and nuanced picture of how well a country is actually doing on its path towards universal access. If a country in, say, Cluster 4 is outperforming its cluster peers, we can ask why. We can learn from their success. And conversely, if a country is lagging behind its peers, it signals a need for more focused attention, but within a realistic comparative framework. This kind of research fundamentally is about making knowledge more valuable, more applicable in the real world. It's about encouraging critical thinking, questioning those old assumptions about how we group countries, and ultimately using solid data to make smarter, more effective decisions to reach that vital goal: universal access to safe water and sanitation for everyone.
So to sum it all up then, this deep dive has really shown us how country clustering offers this new, powerful way to understand the incredibly complex, multifaceted challenge of global water and sanitation access. It moves us past those simple classifications, geography, income, to show us the nuanced realities on the ground. And that opens up real opportunities for more targeted, more effective action. It's about getting smarter, getting more precise about tackling these huge global problems.
Indeed. And maybe a final thought for you to consider. Next time you turn on your tap, something many of us barely think about, or even just when you read about communities around the world struggling for clean water, consider how a tool like country clustering, this sophisticated statistical approach, helps us see the kind of invisible threads connecting these global challenges. It really shows how data, when we apply it thoughtfully, can light the way towards more equitable, more sustainable solutions. And it makes you wonder, what other big global problems do you think might benefit from this kind of data-driven, nuanced approach?
That's an excellent question to ponder. We really hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective, and maybe even sparked your own curiosity to explore more about global development and the power of data-driven insights.